Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on yet another conversation with today, Charles. Going to get myself out of this faster than normal and welcome our panel. Dan, I'm going to start with you. Just generally, how are things going? What's going on in your business career right now? What things are you seeing to help frame the discussion, and a little bit about your firm?
Oh, sure. I live in North Carolina, but I practice all over the country and have practiced for the last 30 years. Our firm handles a variety of insurance-related disputes. And, unlike most people, I have been working from home for the last 4 or 5 weeks, and so has everyone else in the rest of our firm. And it's worked pretty well. Businesses throughout North Carolina are all at stay at home, although we're, looking at some back to work opportunities, I think like a lot of the states are. We've been making the best of it, though, by doing a lot of Zoom conferences. And I think the legal profession is able to do that perhaps a little bit better than a lot of other businesses, because I've been contacted by a number of friends and associates around the state, and their restaurants are shut down, their businesses are shut down, the clothing stores are shut down. It's really been quite devastating for them. But insofar as our firm is concerned, we're very fortunate.
And Greg, how about same question to you? Just general information.
Yeah. Hey, thanks. Good early afternoon, everybody. So I'm here in Knoxville, Tennessee, and like Dan, our firm handles all kinds of cases, like insurance cases, like other types of cases, both in the class action and mass action arena, and then also the one-off cases. So I've been doing this over 31 years. What I've been able to do throughout my career is handle different types of cases. And in fact, the first 15 or so years, I actually represented companies like insurance companies. So that's sort of given me, and I think Dan has some of the similar experience, sort of gives us a good background to discuss these business interruption type cases and related cases that are going on with respect to what's happening in our country. Like Dan, we were remote capable, as I call it, early on, because we actually have offices around the country that are working remotely, with the mothership being located in Knoxville. And, it is tough because I love interaction and personal interaction. Of course, this is video interaction, but I do miss the walks down the hall, talking with lawyers and things like that. But overall, doing very well, blessed, and look forward to talking with you today about different topics that may be of interest to our viewers.
Thanks, Greg. And Shannon, over to you. Just some general framing.
Sure. Hi, my name is Shannon Carson. I'm a managing shareholder of Berger Montague. We are headquartered in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, with offices also located around the country in Washington, D.C., and San Diego, California, and Minneapolis, Minnesota. We like Greg and Dan are at this point and like all of you I'm sure are settling in to the new COVID-19 reality of working from home, working remotely, communicating with our colleagues using some new methods of communication and technologies that maybe we weren't doing 3 or 4 months ago. And I'm just, I think like everybody, just sort of stunned at the overall change in the universe here in just such a short amount of time. I was just talking on a conference call late last night about a trip that I made in early February, and here we are on April 29th, and that just seems like ages ago. But this is the new reality, and I think we're all thinking that this isn't, going to go on here for at least the next few months. And our firm, which has about 70 lawyers across the country, really focuses its representation on small businesses, and what we're doing right now is basically we've launched a task force of about 15 to 20 attorneys who are just solely dedicated at this point to consulting with small businesses all across the country and trying to figure out how they're being affected by COVID-19 and advising them on all kinds of issues, including issues that we're going to touch upon today involving business interruption insurance, involving the CARES Act and the PPP, Paycheck Protection. And so that's what we're doing. And I'm really pleased to be here today and appreciate the opportunity.
So, Nick, if I could just frame the issues, and generally the audience is going to be interested in a couple of things, right? First, they'll be interested in, let's say, the retail-based business. Does their business interruption insurance kick in? We also have service-based businesses where is their business interruption insurance even worthwhile? And then PPP, we're going to see the fallout of that in terms of bank preferences and what happens with the second round of funding. I guess, gentlemen, to cap it off, if I'm a restaurant owner right now, retail-based business, bricks and mortar, I'm shut down, whether it's because no one's coming to the store or local government wants me shut down, do I have a shot at business interruption insurance based on my physical brick and mortar being shut down? Naturally, I think insurance companies are going to claim there's no damage to the property or there's a virus exclusion. Guys, what does the business owner need to know right now? Like at the heart of it, can they make a claim? What's the odds of success?
Well, any of us can talk on it. All three of us are versed in these issues. But the main thing is make sure, first and foremost, that you view your policy. Look for any language. I know you may not be a lawyer, you may not be versed in things, but look at it. And if you think in the slightest way that there could be coverage, and frankly, even if you can't tell, make sure you make the claim immediately. Because, again, from when I was representing companies, I know that they will either like to deny immediately or elongate the process or issue what's called the reservation of rights letter saying, hey, we'll talk about it a little bit now, but we're not going to give coverage, but we'll look at it more closely. Whatever it is, you need to make sure first and foremost that you get your policies of insurance for your business. Doesn't matter what kind of business. It could be a car dealership, restaurant, hair salon, whatever the business is, make sure you get that policy, review it, and then reach out to folks like us in order to see if there's a viable claim.
Charles, let me kind of pick up where Greg left off on that and maybe repeat a few things, but in a slightly different way. Most small businesses probably have never read their policy. In fact, may have never seen their policy. And you have here, these policies are called commercial general liability policies. The shorthand for that is CGL policies. And if you've not even read your policy, you need to call your insurance agent to get a copy of the policy. And I have some thoughts about potential insurance agent liability that we could talk about perhaps later. But get the policy, and the language in the policy is dense. It's an archaic insurance language, and no normal person can read it. So if you're out there and you look at your policy and it's like gibberish, well, it's intended by the insurance company to be gibberish because the language is very specific and it's very arcane. Most of these policies were written by what's called from the ISO, the Insurance Services Office. They write standard policies, but then those policies are sent off around the country and they're modified by different insurance companies, and then depending on the type of business that you have. But there definitely can be business interruption coverage. Indeed, there's a business interruption section in most policies. That's why you're buying the doggone insurance, is if your business is interrupted, you have insurance for that. Shannon?
Sure. Well, I guess the first thing that I'd like to just make sure is stated here is that Greg and Dan, Bryson, and I have talked, and our three firms have actually formed a consortium to be able to put together the resources that are necessary to literally be able to review thousands of insurance contracts that are being sent to us. And we all have staffs that have now been trained to look at these, as Dan said, dense policies, and they know what issues to look for. They know what issues to spot. They know, the devil's in the details in these contracts, and they know what to look for. And so, early on in this process, it was important to us to be a resource for people to have this opportunity. And one of the things that we immediately concluded is that, look, people are hurting right now. Businesses are very much, are losing revenue and profits as a result of COVID-19, and don't have the extra money lying around to pay, some lawyer $600 or $700 an hour, to review these contracts just to figure out whether at the outset they actually have a claim. And so what we decided to do, and what little we can do here, is our three firms have formed this consortium to provide a resource for businesses to review these contracts free of charge. And we're taking cases on a fully contingent basis where we identify contracts that arise, these claims for business interruption insurance. And so, as Greg and Dan said, people pay for these insurance policies exactly for what is now happening, so that they have protection for business interruption and for claims for lost revenue when a crisis or a pandemic like this arises. And there is great difference in the language in these contracts and specific in these contracts regarding what is and what's not covered. It really does take a lawyer to unearth and analyze because there are a lot of arguments that can be made. But you have to know the background of the case law and know what you're looking for.
Shannon, I appreciate that, right? So I'm a lawyer. I run a franchise law firm. We don't handle this stuff, right? But I want to just give some actionable advice, right? I have clients that are franchisors, right? Meaning they manage their franchisees, they operate out of their corporate building. They're technically providing a service. We have franchisees who are operating restaurants and other businesses, right? Their questions are, hey, do I have a shot here? And that's why I think it'd be great. And we, to get to the specifics of, for example, if I use my own policy, I'm a law firm, service-based business. I have a policy, right? There's a provision that says that they'll pay for actual loss of business income due to suspension of my operations, right? My staff can't come to my physical office. They're all operating remotely. There's a question there, do I have damages? But more specific for the restaurant owner, let's just give, gentlemen, maybe 3 scenarios. That restaurant owner's out there, I agree, it has to be reviewed by a lawyer. I would imagine that, these people are pretty sophisticated. The questions I'm getting from the franchisees are, hey, do I have a shot? B, if my policy has a virus exclusion in it, do I have a shot? C, I've been told by lawyers maybe to file a claim and we can make a bad faith claim on a policy. Let's talk about specifics. If you guys want to handle maybe the virus exclusion, or you want to handle the provision that says there needs to be direct physical damage to the property, get to the specifics of that just to give these business owners some context.
All right. Well, let's make sure first though, look, here's what, it doesn't matter who it is. Here's what you're going to be looking to recover, to your question.
Yeah.
Lost revenue, lost profits, closure, reopening costs, litigation costs, related costs. So that's number one. Number two, with respect to exclusions, you will have certain things to answer your question. Do I have a shot if there's a virus exclusion? Well, I mean, it is going to depend on the policy. And here it's also important. It's going to depend upon, to some extent, where you're located, where you're going to file. And so those are all those things to answer you specifically. Yes, even if you have a virus exclusion, you may have a shot because maybe it was closed due to a civil authority order. We know that there have been obviously stay-at-home orders. And so you've got to balance the safety of the employees and others versus, oh, I got to stay open to make money and provide for my family. But to answer the question specifically, and it's not a cop-out, it's going to depend on what your policy says. If there's a virus exclusion, yes, it makes it tougher. If there is no virus exclusion, then okay. But there are other exclusions that you've got to consider as well. What constitutes physical damage? Is a virus covered under the physical damage part or property damage part? And if the virus can be removed by a simple Clorox wet cloth, so those are all things that we need to consider, and why even in your situation, when you look at your policy and it has a virus exclusion, you may have an uphill battle, but that does not mean that the battle is lost at the beginning. But you've got to set the wheels in motion.
Let me, Charles, and again, just following up on that. Yes, businesses have a shot. They need to make a claim with their insurance company. The insurance company will send them a letter explaining, yes, we think you have coverage, or no, you don't have coverage, and here's why. And then you can read their analysis of why they don't think you have coverage. You do not want to wait. I know damages are continuing to accrue, so people may think, well, I want to wait until I know what all my damages are. That is not the right mindset. As soon as you become aware of the potential loss, you need to put your insurance company on notice and send a letter. There's a three-part analysis on every commercial general liability policy. Is there property damage that was caused by an occurrence to which no exclusion applies? And if that's the case, then you have coverage. So is there property damage? That's a hard, it's a bit of a hard analysis here. How did the coronavirus cause damage to property? Property damage is damage to tangible property. Like, a hurricane comes through and knocks down your business or shuts it down. Boy, there's property damage and it shut down your business and you have business losses. So it's much more nuanced from the coronavirus because typically the government shuts you down. Or did you have someone in your, say, a restaurant that had coronavirus that was perhaps had the virus within the restaurant? I think that's different than the government just shutting you down. So do you have property damage? Was there an occurrence? That's important. No one's talked about that much, but an occurrence is defined under the policy as some sort of an event that's happened. And we'll skip over that, to which no exclusion applies. Some of the exclusions that are in a lot of these policies, they're an endorsement that came out, I believe, in 2006 by the insurance industry in response to the SARS and other pandemics that they were worried about. And it's a cat and mouse game with these insurance companies. Every time they see potential coverage, they try to bring it back in. So there may very well be some virus exclusions that are pretty tough. But until you get the denial letter or acceptance letter from your insurance company based on your particular policy, you don't know what their analysis is going to be.
So if I'm a business owner, I am a business owner, and I'm sitting here listening to this. I mean, a few things are coming up, and I would love your guys' opinions. Maybe Dan, we'll start with you, and we'll go around. So if I'm listening to this, there's a lot of BS here. That the reason I bought insurance in the first place is because I was hedging against the potential risk of some sort of event happening, and that's any insurance policy, whether that's car or health or whatever.
Right.
And so if I'm listening to this, I'm like, the insurance company that promised me to have my back, whatever buzzword they used on their national commercial, clearly does not have my back. And I think the fallout of this is, one, businesses probably need to have an attorney review their policy before they get a policy on the front end, which is like, really, it's I'll just sign my name to it in current world because someone told me I need insurance, I'm going to go get it. They don't review it. And then secondly, there's a lot of garbage here, which is exactly probably where a lot of your guys' business is going to come from, because there's going to be class action lawsuits because it's somewhat fraudulent on the way that these insurance companies set it up. So I would just, from where uneducated, not a lawyer, this is where my point of view is, that I think a lot of brands are going to be very frustrated with, because they're going to feel lied to in this model. I would love your opinions on that. Dan, we'll start with you.
Yeah, your point is a good one. Insurance policies like this are meant to provide coverage for catastrophic losses. I mean, think of a hurricane or an earthquake, things that are, horrible, large-scale disasters. This is a disaster, not unlike a hurricane striking or a terrible earthquake that might strike California, hurricanes all through the southeast, and there's coverage for those types of things. However, the thing that many people are not aware of is that it's a cat and mouse game. Insurance company, who's the cat and who's the mouse? I tell you, they don't want to provide coverage often. I mean, that's just the way it is. And I have questions about an insurance agent, who are very schooled in these policies that, a normal person can understand. Did your insurance, agent explain to you, these are the things you don't have coverage for? And you can get coverage for anything, you can have discussions about that, but most people just accept the standard printed legalese type policy that they get. But I agree with you. You would think there would be coverage. I mean, a lot of times in a hurricane, for example, the whole battle is on, was it flood damage or was it wind damage? Because I think it's wind damage is covered, but flood damage is not covered under the policy. So this game progresses on evaluating all these businesses on how did the damage occur. Was it the wind first or the rain first? But that's the kind of silly things that these policies, the analysis kind of lapses into, unfortunately. And that's the kind of analysis and hair splitting we're going to see start to happen here as well, unfortunately.
Gentlemen, I think those are good frameworks that you guys are offering. Before this, I took a look at my policy. I actually put in a claim yesterday just to do it. My policy doesn't have a virus exclusion. It says that the limitation is for direct physical loss of or property or physical damage to the property. So technically, where I'm located, there is a civil authority order. My team can't work in our office, right? And I'm using myself as a hypothetical, so I know the language. No virus exclusion. We lost use of our office. Now I'm putting myself as a service-based business. I'll put myself in the position of a franchisor. Technically, people aren't buying and selling product from my office. Teams operating remotely. My insurance company is going to take the position, I think, that we're just going to pay you whatever extra cost you incur as a result of people working remotely from home. Can you tie or connect where a business's service is not servicing customers from the physical location? Could someone like me, franchisor, and I understand there's 1,000 caveats. That's why we have to review it with lawyers. But could you argue for diminished income and profit?
Again, it'll depend on the policy, but yeah, what the coverage is for, right? It's what I mentioned earlier. Lost revenue, lost profit, closure or reopening costs, depending on your situation, litigation costs. Those are the primary things covered under business interruption insurance. You know, you're not insuring your car, you're insuring your business against loss. And as Nick was talking about earlier, you know, that's what we thought we were getting, and you had our back when we paid you all of this money in premiums. Now we're wanting you to have our back and pay us what we deserve. And you know, you've even seen, forget politics, this is not a political issue, but you've even heard our president say, you know, you insurance companies, you need to do right by your policyholders and businesses, because what's happening to Main Street USA. So that's why it is important right out of the chute, you make that claim and do what you can to put you in the best possible position to have a viable claim. You may get a reservation of rights letter, the letter Dan was referencing earlier. That's what it's called. You may get some other letter that, oh, well, we'll pay you partial, but we won't pay you all, or we're not going to pay you anything. But the point is, until you know that you know, you need to make sure and go ahead and get the claim in, and then have someone like us or related take a look at it for you.
You know, Greg, I think that's a great point, and I think Nick's point is a great point, because there's a bigger philosophical issue here, which is insurance companies, at least from my perception, are trying to frame this as this is just an extension of property damage coverage, which may or may not be true with the language, but yet the marketing of the insurance has been portrayed as something very different. And
You're in good hands. Yeah.
I mean, I think that's
you're my neighbor.
Yeah. So I think those points that you're raising, Nick brought up, are, you know, those are foundational elements that smart litigators like you guys, I think it provides an interesting framework too, because, you know, if I'm a judge, I'd be very inclined to start raising some issues here.
Right. You can't have it both ways. You can't expect to receive money with no expectation of covering losses. I mean, now granted, I've been in those meetings back in the day when I was representing companies where you'd be surprised that may be the expectation. And we have seen, look, some insurers have, for example, given some money back to their policyholders because not as many folks are driving right now, right? But on a whole, with respect to these types of losses being sustained by folks like your franchisees, retail shops, everyone else or anyone else that's listening and watching this webinar, you're going to face an uphill battle. We know, for example, that 6 states have already sort of quasi said you're going to have a tough battle to get coverage, whereas 7 states have indicated, you know what, you better make sure, insurance company, that you're right when you make a denial. And then in California specifically, just examples here, the California Insurance Commissioner, among others, because what was happening, the agents and others were encouraging people not to file claims. Make sure you remember that.
Yeah.
Oh, you don't need to file a claim. And Dan referenced it earlier about agent liability or responsibility. Well, you know, your agent's supposed to have your back as well. And discouragement of claims to be filed, the California government and leadership said, don't do that. So be thinking about that as well.
Remember, these are contracts, and these are contracts between the parties. So anything that's ambiguous is construed against the drafter, which insurance companies drafted these. So if there's anything ambiguous at all, if it's not crystal clear, the court or the insurance company is supposed to provide coverage. And that is a fundamental part of contract law that even most lay people understand.
That's exactly right. And just to go back to one of the questions that was asked before about your own policy, and you said, you know, no virus exclusion. Is this, you know, quote unquote direct physical loss? And I just want to point out that we've researched that issue, and courts generally consider non-structural property damage claims to buildings that are rendered uninhabitable, particularly in cases involving gas, for example, or bacteria, for example, have indeed suffered direct physical loss, which occurs when, and this is a quote from a leading case, an actual change in insured property, then in a satisfactory state, occasioned by accident or other fortuitous event directly upon the property, causing it to become unsatisfactory for future use or requiring that repairs be made. So I just, there's a lot of room in there, as you can see, particularly with respect to policies that don't have, a virus exclusion, which, by the way, some policies do. And after SARS occurred in sort of the 2002 to 2005 time period, some of the insurance policies did begin to insert these virus exclusions into the contracts, but many have not, like the one that you pointed out. And so those are the kind of things that we're looking at.
I want to get a vice opinion here, and I'm going to give a brief example at the front end of this. So years ago, my life insurance policy, we go with USAA, and USAA was great about pulling out every month for my auto insurance. It was coming out. For some reason, they don't pull out our life insurance policy. They never call us. They never let us know. We've lapsed. I did not pay for it, and they go, your life insurance policy is gone, and it's now gone up since that point because you've gotten older. So it was a disaster. The lesson I learned there is if I'm not paying for insurance, they are very easy to go like this. It's not our responsibility. So to the business owner out there that is navigating their cash flow and they're looking at things to cut, I would imagine your guys' advice is do not have a lapse in insurance payment, because if you do, then they may point to that. Is that an accurate statement?
Every single time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Hey, one fun thing I want to point out to everyone is, insurance is supposed to be a zero-sum game. In other words, they take in premiums and the companies pay out typically more than they take in, and it's vast sums of money, and they make their profits based on the flow of the money. And the longer they can hold on to it, the more they make. But underwriting does actuarial analysis of these things. And so it'll be very interesting as these lawsuits progress to get discovery, to find out if from an underwriting perspective, they have analyzed potential losses due to viruses or pandemics. And if they did, and if they have analyzed that, they will have reserved money. And there will be money there, and there will be documents that talk about it, because insurance companies don't do things just on a wing and a prayer. They look at the perils that are out there. They reserve vast sums of money that they're seeing from an actuarial perspective on the claims that come in. So I look forward very much to seeing what certain insurance companies have internally said about virus coverage, pandemics, and things like that, particularly if they don't have that exclusion in their policy. And if they have reserved money for these types of perils, in my opinion, they're dead. And number two, reinsurance. Remember, there's umbrella insurance out there that a lot of people may have that you're sold by your insurance agents. And remember, insurance companies get insurance. It's called reinsurance. And so they'll be reinsured for types of perils and things as well. And that's a whole another discussion.
Yeah, and that's Lloyd's of London.
Yeah, a lot of layers.
Yeah, Lloyd's of London, it's just a syndicate of different brokers. I mean, it's not like State Farm, right? But a lot of it's involved with, to Dan's point, they're in the business of making money, and they make money in many different ways. But if they've reserved something, they've put something in reserve for perils like pandemics or viruses, and the documents show that, they're going to be in a world of hurt.
It's interesting because unrelated to this, I view there's like two realities. There's Main Street, where all these business owners are hurting every day. And then there's so-called Wall Street, insurance companies, government, fake money, and really fake contracts. These are just money moving around. And these are moments where I'm proud to be a lawyer, because I think, the role you guys are serving is a good one. People are asking for your contact info. If I could recap some issues here, One, it's you need to get your policy, request it from your broker. Two is you need to get that policy over to a legal team like you guys or whoever they're working with. Ask for, hey, could you review this? Three, understand there's going to be things the lawyers are looking at. And again, I'm just very paraphrasing, but is there a virus exclusion? That may not mean you don't get coverage, but it's a roadblock. What does your policy say? And I do see variation. I mean, I will say my own policy, if I thought the stakes are high enough, I could see easily litigating it because I agree with your advice, which is the language is ambiguous, at least in my policy, I think. So you need a team to look at that. I also think if you're a business owner out there and credible firms are working on this on a contingency basis, why not get in the queue and get involved in the process and see where that goes? Because what's also interesting too is the legal system is not perfect either. And sometimes legal decisions are swayed by political sentiment and people would like to think it's not, but it is, right? So I also think that that's important stuff for you guys. So I think that's important. And it's interesting because I think you're also correct that brokers, and I don't take it maliciously, I think they believe it, are communicating the company policy of, well, you could file it, but you're not going to get any coverage. Or I doubt you're going to get any coverage. So that's another interesting dimension that you gentlemen bring to this. Yeah. Nick, in terms of this topic, I mean, I think it's great advice, and I'd love to also get into the PPP. What other items you think for everyone listening we need to cover on this point?
Well, I think we've covered it. One is you have to take moments like this. Like if coronavirus is not forcing you to reevaluate your to-do list when we get out of this on things that you need to do differently, it sounds like before you go sign the damn paperwork, have an attorney review it moving forward, because that could have saved some of the trouble here. And obviously the advice here that there are people that are going to have you back here when the insurance companies are saying, I said that I would, but I actually don't. So be on the lookout for solutions. Three, don't make sure you don't have a lapse in payment, because you don't want to have this come back on you when you're looking at funds. And I agree, Charles. I do want to. I would obviously any more feedback on this, but I want to switch it into PPP if we can and get your guys' opinions on this. I mean, go ahead.
Just real fast, because you just said it perfectly. There are people out there that have your back. That really resonated with me when you said it. That's why we set this thing up in terms of our three firms here, Dan, Greg, and myself, and what our firms are doing. If anyone out there has a question, you can email me directly at scarson@bm.net, and we'll get back to you. And our turnaround time right now, because we have so many people working on this, we can review. If you get us your insurance contract, we can get back to you within a week and say, this is what we think. We think you might have a claim, you might not have a claim, and here's why. So that's all I wanted to say, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, so appreciate that. Thanks, Shannon. And clearly our audience is asking for your guys' contact information, so that's great. And we will make sure that it's distributed within the chat as well, so that you guys can reach out to these guys. So as we switch into just some overall things on PPP, I mean, in my opinion, Jake from State Farm better go into witness protection. And Bob, the banker, better be right behind him, because these big banks, they're going to have some issues on the other side of this. And if it's teaching us anything, the have your back, like lawyers get a bad rap for not like being the bad. The only people that win in lawsuits are the lawyers. But the reality is, we just learned that Jake from State Farm doesn't have your back, and Bob, the banker, he's like, I got you, and now we're weeks out of that first tranche, and we're having some issues. So, general things that you guys are seeing from the PPP side, and what you see coming up in the future.
Sure.
We see terrible behavior from these banks. I mean, when you look at the loan, the origination fees they get, If the loan is 2 million to 10 million, they get 1%. They make $100,000. They make $100,000 fee every time they give a loan to their bigger clients, and they get virtually nothing to the small businesses. It's absolutely despicable.
Well, not just that. Think about this, guys. We know so far, for example, that 10 billion with a B, not with an M, $10 billion worth of these fees and more. I mean, it's accumulating as we're talking, have already been received by the banks. So their hierarchy of, even though the CARES Stimulus PPP Act itself requires it to be a first come, first served basis. I mean, that's what it is. That's what it's meant to do. But instead, we're going to make sure our biggest, best clients are taken care of, such that by the time it trickles down to even the mid-sized company, and remember, it's supposed to be 500 folks or fewer. But my point is, when it trickles down to Main Street USA, there's no money left. And that's why we've already seen it run out of money. You've seen all of the articles, you've seen the outrage, but the folks left standing are the banks who are making the fees and the charges on closing with respect to the different tranches that are outlined under the Act. And so that's why the mom and pops, that's why Main Street USA has been essentially left out in the cold. And here's another thing to think about. We've also seen, and you've seen it reported, some discriminatory practices going on. It's not just the wealthy, obviously the biggest, best clients who the banks are going to provide, quote, concierge service for. But in addition to the middle level and other levels of businesses that are not getting any money or didn't get any money from the first tranche, you're seeing that, hey, certain minority businesses are really shoved to the side. And that is just, I mean, none of it's acceptable, but then you're making a clear determination about who gets what.
Gentlemen, I think this could be a bigger issue than the business interruption insurance. And it all is going to depend on how much more funding comes on the other side. I'm not sure about the discrimination. I'm like one of the Americans who's so tired of hearing about discrimination in this planet. But what I do find compelling, and where I think every bank could get hammered and should get hammered, is you could queue up all those small business owners who filed at 9:30 a.m. on the Monday of opening up those portals, and I could guarantee you could see all of them shoved aside for the bigger clients.
Oh, sure.
Right?
Well,
and that's where the outrage is. My firm was one of them, quite frankly.
I'm outraged too. And let's put aside, instead of the term discrimination, let's say preference, because I was skeptical at first, but then we researched it, right? And this is what we found. Quote, is the PPP first come, first serve? Answer, yes. Quote, okay? Hold on, let me give you another one here. See second interim rule at page 14. Quote, favoritism by the lender in processing time or prioritization of the director or equity holder's PPP application is prohibited. And what we saw and what we've all read about in these articles is just the direct contrary to those two quotes that I just provided to you. And it's clear the preference was given. And that's what we're trying to redress.
Well,
I think call it what you will. My point is, it's a preference issue. Preference issue.
I think there was discrimination out there, and I think you're going to find that there's been some pretty rampant discrimination out there as we continue to analyze this, unfortunately and tragically.
Out of curiosity, just from a process standpoint, because you think about the small business owner, they had to get in line to get the PPP loan. They're getting in line for business interruption situations. It's like, and then you think about other lawsuits that are going to come out of this, whether it's malpractice on doctors when someone is passed. There's going to be things that come up here. Is the court system going to get overwhelmed that ultimately the timeline, like a lot of these businesses just aren't going to make it? Like there's not enough time to legally go put action in place. And could the court system get now overwhelmed with all the misbehaviors that we've had, both politically and then from people that we were supposed to trust?
Yeah, I think it's possible they could be. I really do. I think if the insurance companies fight or the banks fight, it could take a couple of years. Our judicial resources in courts are already underfunded, overwhelmed often, and I think it's a sad situation.
But what's the choice? I mean, it's sort of okay, well, what do you do then? I mean, do you just give up and pack it in and head to the house? Well,
yeah.
Or the thing that you've worked your entire life for, the business that you've created, the employees that you've loved, all of those things that we do, right? Everybody on this panel, and I'm sure the vast majority of folks participating in the webinar, I mean, you're in the same situation. So, the choices are just say to heck with it, or no, darn it, I'm going to plant a stake right here in the ground and we're going to go forward. Now, whether the courts can ultimately handle every single case, that's a question for another day, but for sure, let's try to do it now.
That's right. You don't have to fight.
And to be clear, just to let the viewers know, along with Greg and Dan, our firms have collectively filed lawsuits now related to this reordering issue, this preference issue under the PPP against JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, and PNC, and our phones are just ringing off the hook now with businesses contacting us and asking us to review their situations for them as well.
Right.
Do the lawsuits ever extend into irresponsible businesses that take a potbelly, that when it makes sense for them, they talk about thousands of employees when it benefits them, and when it benefits them to say we have under 500, the narrative switches. So it actually, like, them manipulating the data, ultimately it probably hurts their franchisees, because
Right.
potbelly corporate goes to the top, right?
Well, Rubio talked about it, right? He said, I want essentially an accounting, because you're having that sort of activity take place. I'm sure some of you probably read now why they did it. I think it was because of the public outcry, but the Los Angeles Lakers, for example, returned $4.6 million. And you're always scratching your head, why in the blankety blank would they have ever made a claim to begin with? Well, because companies are going to look for any windfall they possibly can, and especially those that you don't keep an eye on. Now, in that case, LA, hey, good for them, even though, again, it took away money from a business owner who could have had it sooner, because that $4.6 million was gone where these other smaller businesses could have gotten it. And there have been several other companies like that have attempted to do the same thing and have been called out by both the media and various representatives.
It's interesting because depending on the second round, the funds running out, how many people get funded, ironically, the banks may become the biggest lobbyists of small business owners and potentially a third round of funding to cover up their own liability. And that may be the only reason why there be a third round of funding, is because banks now become lobbyists for the system. It's interesting, guys, from a philosophical standpoint, and Nick is getting to this, which is, I think this is a real opportunity for lawyers to really readjust the public perception. Because on the one hand, I am a lawyer. I get frustrated with other lawyers and judges and get irritated, especially in litigation. But we've had a bad rap, and I think in many ways deservingly so, because of a certain minority. And then speaking of gentlemen like yourselves, make no mistake, right? You're doing this because there's a big potential contingency fee, but I also want people to know what goes behind it is many decades of work supporting your own teams and your staffing. I mean, you guys are small businesses or medium.
We are.
So as a fellow lawyer, I'm proud of seeing that. Look, if you make millions, God bless, because this is a big uphill lift. And I think for the lawyers out there, they really, Nick and I talk about with brands how on the other side of this, the value proposition needs to change. It is a people connection. And I think lawyers that are going to understand that, really understand the value proposition of what they're doing and make that connection, I hope can set a new trajectory for the legal profession. I think you guys are doing a great job in this arena. I think it's going to be amazing to see. I'm particularly interested in that PPP. I would love to see the banks get hammered and punished every step of the way. And I think they've all left themselves exposed. And if you want to set up a branch in New Jersey through our firm, just let us know.
Well, listen, real quickly.
Yeah.
One of the most famous lawyers in the history of our country, right? Abraham Lincoln said, to your point, a lawyer's stock and trade are his time and advice. That's what we've got. That's what we give to our clients, our time and our advice. And I can speak, and I'm not doing this. I can speak for the panel because I've known these guys for years. We're not the ambulance chasing lawyers that do deserve a black eye. You can check us out. I would encourage folks to, if there's a question, but that's what we have. And we're here to do the best that we can for every client that we may have the privilege of representing from all of this mess.
It's a David and Goliath battle. And whenever you take on an insurance company or a large bank like JP Morgan, they're the Goliath. But you know how that turned out for the giant. So we're going to get them.
Yeah.
You know what, Dan, that's great. And what's interesting too, is even if they get the funding, their actions should be punished anyway. And there's liability there. I mean, there is liability. JP Morgan, excuse my language, needs to be knocked on its ass. Because, and I don't know how much they got in bailouts, during the last crisis or whatnot, but JP Morgan and all these big banks need to take a hit. They really do.
Doing our best.
Yep.
Any final thoughts, guys, that you want to throw in here before we sign off?
Thank you for having us
Well,
on your show.
Thanks, and thanks to everyone who participated that we weren't able to see, but know we're listening and watching.
I echo that. Thank you very much for having us today.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, and if anybody that's watching this needs these gentlemen's contact information, you know how to get Charles and I, and we're going to put it in the chat boxes so that everybody can see it. And if this didn't open up the best business post coronavirus, here it is. Go get into insurance of coronavirus after this, because everybody's going to sign up for it. It's going to be right there waiting for millions.
That's it.
Thanks, guys. Really appreciate the time. Best of luck.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.